whether the use of, on those 3 occasions that have been acknowledged by the CIA and reported in the media as to the technique that was used.
This is the testimony before Congress. He's being questioned by congressmen.
As to whether it was a violation, a per se violation of the Convention Against Torture or not. Would you agree with me, Professor Yu?
Your question is, you're saying there's an open question whether waterboarding in the way used by the CIA violated the Convention Against Torture.
That's what I'm saying. It's an open question.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just want to make sure. Sure. I think one of the problems is that the Convention Against Torture is interpreted different ways by different countries. And so if your question is, does waterboarding, is the way it's been described by the director of the CIA, Mr. Hayden, violates the treaty, it may violate the treaty as understood by some countries.
Right.
Can I understand? Our understanding of the treaty is defined by the criminal statute and the Torture Victims Protection.
Without objection, Mr. White has 1 additional minute, which he has yielded to Mr. Delahunt.
I would pose this. The techniques, whatever was utilized on those occasions, and I think we can agree it's an open question, if they were used on American military personnel, it would still be an open question as to whether they violated the Convention Against Torture then.
I assume you're still asking me.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, Mr. Delahunt, my understanding of the testimony that the head of OLC gave before the committee was that it was his view that if we were using it as part of the training on our own servicemen and officials who might be captured, that I thought it was his view in his testimony that that would not be a violation of the statute. But
so if it was used by an enemy because we considered that it did not constitute torture, and the enemy that utilized that on American military personnel would not be in violation of the Convention Against Torture. Is that a fair statement?
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness will answer this question. Please.
Sir, I don't remember whether Mr. Bradbury went that far and reached that conclusion. That could be an implication of what his statement was, but I don't...
Excuse me, the question was of you, not of Mr. Bradbury.
I know, sir, but I wanted to make sure that I'm not, that it's clear what the administration's position is. I understand it is because they directly answered the question to the committee.
But would you answer the question if some enemy interrogator used that technique on an American prisoner of war, would that be...
My view now is that it would depend on the circumstances.
I wanted to address the fact that the university is hiding behind academic freedom in terms of keeping John Yoo as a professor at Berkeley. We have rules that we're accountable to, and John Yoo violated those systematically. But Christopher Edley, the dean at Bowl Hall, has refused to even bring this up. So there is again, there's this protection of a war criminal here, and I think we have to, continue to fight this, not give up until John Yoo is out of this institution. Thank you.
I also want to keep reminding you, it doesn't matter whether waterboarding is torture. It's torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. All of those are included. And I wanted to say one other thing. You ought to read the 9th and 10th Amendments. All powers that are not specifically stated in the Constitution are retained by the states and by the people.
So I'm just going to try to wrap up and tie together a few things that others have said. So speaking just to what Ed Wiles was sharing with us about the ethical violations by John Yoo. All lawyers face a duty of care, otherwise known as a duty of competence, as well as a duty to practice our profession free of conflicts of interest. It's interesting to note Professor Yoo's role in the Bush administration. I actually will differ with Ann here. His client was not the United States president. His client was the United States. He didn't work for the administration, he worked for the Justice Department. Earlier, we heard about the pressure being asserted by executive officials on John Yoo and others to achieve what they would find a favorable result with respect to this question of what the president was permitted to do. The Office of Legal Counsel, in which John Yoo worked, is often called the constitutional conscience of the executive branch. It is not the White House counsel's office. It was not his job to explicate the outer bounds of executive authority. And also talked a little bit about the process through which John Yoo was exonerated by the Justice Department in its later ethical investigation of any wrongdoing. A couple things about that investigation. The first is it never even purported to assess whether or not there were criminal violations. It wasn't even part of the inquiry. He's never been assessed by any body for his apparent violations of law. The ethical investigation that did explore to a limited extent whether or not he was ethically culpable, there are a couple things to note here. The first, he had extraordinary rights procedurally. How is it that the subject of an investigation gains access to a report before it is issued, given an opportunity to appeal it before anyone else sees it, and then ultimately writes out of the report its central finding, which was that he and Judge Jay Bybee, who has a lifetime seat on the Ninth Circuit, did at least commit ethical violations, if not outright criminal violations.
There are programs and protests and shows going on all the rest of Berkeley Says No to Torture Week. For all the organizations who have worked on Berkeley Says No to Torture, I want to speak for a minute for World Can't Wait. We have been going at this for many years. And people tell us all the time, you are just preaching to the choir. People don't want to protest anymore. We have an answer to that. Number one, the choir has to sing louder. And number two, we have to go out and we have to grow. And we have to help people understand how to cross that border from paralysis and despair into taking action. And I think this proposal to call on this city and the people of this community to open their arms and this city to the cleared detainees who need a place to go, I think it should extend to the University of California. And the chancellor ought to announce that for everything these people have suffered in the torture chambers, if they can come to Berkeley, if they want to go to college, the University of California should open its doors and welcome the detainees. When we get out there and tell the truth, we are not doing it just because it makes us feel good. We are doing it because we have to. If the people in this country do not stand up now and say no, no more of this torture, if the people of this country are silent, we are complicit. We have no right to turn around and look at the German people and say anything about what they did. But we know that this is not just beating our heads against the wall, because when we step forward with this proposal, Code Pink, Progressive Democrats, the National Lawyers Guild, World Can't Wait, Michael John Institute, when we stepped forward and said, let's do a week of Berkeley Says No to Torture, there were just a handful of us, and all of a sudden people started saying, I love this idea. We need to do this. Can I speak? Can I be part of this? And this is actually something that could happen all over the country. Please do everything you can to make the rest of this week not just a success for the people of Berkeley, but to make this message be heard by the world. Thank you very much.